I don't know, but
You seem to know everyone that's there. I used to see Charlie Terrell just came on. Hi, Charlie.
where's Charlie?
His name just came up on a thing. But anyways, why don't we begin, Joe? Because it's
Okay, yeah, we
on.
want to respect people's time. So
yeah, right. This is the first in our series for the spring, and Dr. Kelley has been very gracious, giving his time and talent to lead us in reflection and discussion type of thing. We will we have now our schedule for the whole spring semester, and we'll be getting it out to you very soon. I think Joe, why don't you just take it away?
okay, great. Well, first of all, thanks, Jack, for the invitation, and Lacey and Joe Macucci as well. I'm really honored to be associated with your work in Philadelphia, and I'm really deeply moved by seeing so many dear friends and colleagues from many different places. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you and to share this time. So I'm going to talk for about 20 to 25 minutes. I might go a little more than that. I've been teaching for so long, you know, it's a bad habit. Keep talking. But our theme for this evening is Augustinian foundations for the 4 principles of Catholic social teaching. So we'll look at the 4 major principles of Catholic social teaching through an Augustinian lens. I have some PowerPoint slides. Now, you know when you die, you'll know that you've gone to hell if the first thing you hear is, we have some PowerPoint slides. So I hope these enrich and help you follow what I'm going to say and don't interfere. So I'm going to share this screen. Sometimes it helps if you choose just the speaker. So, but okay, share screens. Where are my slides? Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're probably aware that there are, by different counts, 7 or 10 principles or themes in Catholic social teaching. The 4 we're going to concentrate on this evening are basic principles of the rest of the Catholic social teaching: human dignity, the common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity. To those, we could add the care for creation, the option for the poor, the dignity of work and of workers, and so forth. But I'm going to concentrate on these 4 and trace them back to Augustine and how he really was the first Christian theologian to really bring them into focus in very particular ways. And then we'll have some time for question and conversation at the end, okay? We're all very much still aware of what happened on the 6th of January, the Feast of the Epiphany, at our capital in Washington. And as you know, there's discussions now about time of discovery. I'd like to start with a different siege and sack of the capital, and specifically one that happened a long time ago on the morning of August 24th in the year 410. On that day, an army of Visigoths attacked the city of Rome. They rampaged through government buildings and public spaces. They damaged property and they killed people. The destruction was significant, but it was limited. It was really limited to the capital area, actually. However, it was as shocking to that world as January 6th was to us and to the rest of the world, really. St. Jerome, who was over at his monastery in Bethlehem, wrote, "It was as if the bright light of the entire world was put out, or as if the whole world perished in one city." That's typical of Jerome, to exaggerate a little bit, but it moved across the empire like a psychological and political tsunami. Now, Augustine had left Italy and returned home to Africa over 20 years earlier, in the year 389. But news of what happened in Rome reached him quickly in Hippo. And soon after the news itself, refugees from Italy began to arrive in North Africa, with thousands disembarking in the harbor at Hippo, actually just a few blocks from his monastery and his church. Augustine responds in a number of different ways. First of all, if you look at his sermons and letters from that year, later 410 and into 411 and 412, his sermons and his letters give voice to the general fear and uncertainty and the distress that was caused by the attack on the Capitol. In several sermons preached in 410 and 411, he testifies to the alarm felt around the empire over the sack of the Capitol. He told his congregation in Hippo that the world is, quote, being laid waste, going to ruin. He continued, the world has grown old, it's full of complaints, full of troubles and pressures. Through such sermons and letters, Augustine gave a public voice to people's anxiety. And that was an important thing to do, to allow people a context in which they could face those fears. He also created a public forum for the refugees who were now among the members of his own congregation in Hippo. He called for a coordinated response to their plight. In Sermon 81, he urged his congregation in Hippo to, quote, show compassion to those who are suffering, to take care of the weak, and at this time of many refugees from abroad, be generous in your hospitality, generous in your good works. He reminded his people that charity and generosity, especially on behalf of the less fortunate, are essential to Christian life. He instructed his priests to investigate all cases of cruelty, to console the victims, helping them not to complain against God despite their sufferings. But for our purposes tonight, he not only gave sermons and wrote letters about the sack of Rome. This historical event led him to write one of his most famous books, City of God. He started writing it about a year and a half to 2 years after 410. And he wrote it to answer questions that people were asking him about this political crisis, the sack of the Capitol. Why did it happen? Who was responsible? What were the political and social consequences? What did it mean for the future? So for the next 14 years, from around 412 to 426, he continues writing this text, which ended up to be, in English, it's over 1,000 pages long. And those questions are very similar to the questions that people are asking about what happened on January 6th. Why did it happen? Who's responsible? What are the consequences? What does it mean for us? This text, as you all probably know, became not only a religious classic, it's a text consulted still today by political scientists, historians, philosophers, as well as theologians. And you may have noticed that President Biden quoted from City of God, Book 19, Chapter 24, in his inaugural address. In this text, especially, not only, but especially in City of God, we find Augustine's foundational arguments for what we today call the four principles of Catholic social teaching: human dignity, the common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity. Now, there are both obvious differences and surprising similarities between the sack of Rome and the sack of Washington's capital. One difference, and it's a big one, is that Rome, the city, would be sacked again in 455 and eventually fall to the Visigoth and Vandal tribes in 475. Hopefully our future will be a bit better than that calamity. Another difference is that outsiders attacked the city of Rome, while insiders attacked our capital. What are some similarities? The Visigoths who attacked the city were homeless tribes wandering around Europe. They had been wandering for decades. They had crossed the northern frontiers of the Roman Empire, where the Romans were not very successful in building a, quote, wall. They were looking for a better life. But their quest for a share in Roman prosperity had been thwarted by a succession of Roman emperors who either ignored them, lied to them, put them off, or even tried to wipe them out. So the issue of immigration is cogent in both cases, though in very different ways. There were also significant problems within the empire itself, problems surrounding justice and the common good. And Augustine spends the 1,000 pages of the City of God elaborating those problems, analyzing them. He reflected deeply over many years, over 14 years of his composition of the text, on social and political problems of his time and place, and on what is the proper Christian response. And in so doing, he elaborates human dignity, the common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity. So let's take a closer look at that. First of all, human dignity. There are two foundations for human dignity in Augustine. The first comes from his reading of Scripture, especially the book of Genesis and the book of Psalms. All things are good because all things come from God the Creator. So we are good as human beings. By nature, we are good. But as a good Platonist, he reminds us that there is a hierarchy of goods, ascending from inanimate matter like rocks to the living matter of plants, to living animals, to human beings who are rational animals with souls, to the angels who are rational spiritual beings, to God who is infinite spirit. One of the reasons I think that Catholic social teaching resonates so well beyond the church and beyond the Christian community is Augustine's foundation is not only scriptural, it is also philosophical. So it moves beyond the community of belief to the general human community. So for Augustine, justice requires observing this order of created beings. We should treat every created being with the respect due to its place in the universe. That means lower things are to be subjected to higher things. A living pet is more important than a pet rock. A child is more important than a pet. People are more important than possessions. We must keep our priorities in proper order. Ordered love is what Augustine called it. It also means, and herein lies the foundation of Augustine's principle of justice, that equality must be preserved among things that are equal, that are on the same level of the hierarchy of being. All human beings, because they are of the same order of creation, are to be treated equally. We are not only linked to one another by sharing the same human nature, Augustine makes a further point. Because we all descend from Adam, we share a common sense of kinship. So we share the same nature, but what is more, we share kinship because of our common ancestry. Put simply, we belong to each other. This is key for Augustine, and we'll elaborate on it just a bit. Injustice arises when we take a secondary characteristic, such as sex, sexual preference, race, ethnicity, wealth, language, or religion, and create different levels of being human, or even, as has happened, relegate some persons to subhuman category in the hierarchy of being, treating people as commodities to be traded, monetized, overvalued, or devalued in some transactional arrangement for profit. All of these violations of human dignity arise from what Augustine calls in letter 140, blameworthy disorder. So this idea of the order of loving is essential in Augustine's ethic. The American executive policy of separating children from parents at the southern border was a vivid example of blameworthy disorder. It involved the devaluing, the objectification of human beings, of children and parents, for the executive's personal and political gain. It was transactional. In his homily number 8 on the first letter of John, Augustine said, quote, "A true Christian should never set himself up over other human beings. If you wish to be better than another person, you will grudge to see that person as your equal. Therefore, you ought to wish all equal to yourself." What's more, as Christians, and here scripture comes back in to enrich the philosophy, we have a deeper insight into the equality of human beings. We are not only descendants of Adam and Eve, united by our common humanity. We are also members of the body of Christ, united in our share in divinity through Christ and the Spirit. Inspired by his faith, Augustine writes in letter 130, which he composed at this time, around 411, 412, "There is no one in the human race to whom we do not owe love." So those are some of the Augustinian themes that lead into consideration of human dignity. The second principle, the common good, it flows right from the first one. President Biden alluded in his inaugural address to Augustine's famous definition of a people, a commonwealth, or a nation. A people is the association of a multitude of rational beings united by common agreement on the objects of their love. He paraphrased a bit, but that's basically what he was referring to. A people is the association of a multitude of rational beings united by common agreement on the objects of their love. Augustine presented this definition in Book 19 of the City of God to contrast it with the definition of a people or a nation offered by Cicero and the Stoic philosophers, who saw the essence of society to be justice. Let's stay with that for a minute. Justice is essential, but not enough for a full Christian understanding of society, according to Augustine. Justice eventuates in laws and social arrangements, in contracts, all necessary, but insufficient for the long-term health of society. The fuller Augustinian understanding of society extends beyond courts of law and contract into the realms of love and covenant. For Augustine, the equality that underlies justice is teleological. That is, it has a goal. It has a long-term goal, a purpose, an ultimate reason. And the goal, the purpose of justice is love. Love of one another and love of God. So the common good, as Augustine understands it, is not only the distribution and availability of necessary goods and services. It's not only equal justice under law, not only opportunity for thriving and development. All of these are important for social justice and the common good. But Augustine's understanding of the common good goes deeper. And a lot of political scientists miss this. Amidst his parsing of justice in human society, Augustine constantly asks, what is the ultimate purpose of being human and of being human together? The answer is love. Love of one another and love of God. And it's in Book 19, especially of the City of God, where he elaborates on these themes. So you're all familiar, I'm sure, with these beautiful sentiments at the end of Book 14. Two loves built two cities. The earthly city created by love of self, carried to the point of contempt for God, and the heavenly city created by God, by love of God, carried to the point of contempt for self. So long as love of self trumps all other loves, justice will be compromised. Only the hierarchy of being, which acknowledges God as the ultimate goal of human love, guarantees and sustains justice and the common good. Only the acknowledgement of God as the ultimate goal of being human and of being human together will guarantee and sustain justice and the common good. That is why, in Augustine's reckoning, justice and the common good in this world will always be in jeopardy, because love of self, carried to the point of contempt for God and for one's fellow human beings, is so deeply embedded in the human condition by original sin. The third principle, solidarity. The persistence of selfishness and subsequent precariousness of justice and the common good leads us to solidarity. Many of you know I met my wife in Poland in the early 1980s. Those were the heady years of Solidarność, the Polish trade union. John Paul II had just been elected Pope, and he brought the Polish rallying cry of solidarity on the red and white Polish flag onto the world stage. What does solidarity mean? In City of God, Augustine analyzes human history, both biblical history for a number of books, and then the history of the world's great empires. He does this with his main paradigm in mind: two loves built two cities. These two loves are in constant struggle with each other, not in a Manichaean sense of cosmic good versus cosmic evil. The struggle between selfishness and selflessness is one we all participate in. The battle between the city of God and the city of man is fought in the arena of human will. Love of God or love of self, every act of selflessness or selfishness is a decision of will. History, society, justice, the common good, all depend on human decisions, not on fate, not on political folly, or on foolish superstition. The directions of history are the results of human choice. This is a theme Augustine comes back to again and again and again throughout City of God. We are responsible. In Sermon 80, delivered shortly after the sack of Rome, Augustine told his people these words: "The times are evil, the times are troubled." That's what people say. Let us live good lives, and the times are good. We ourselves are the times. Whatever we're like, that's what the times are like. So he pushes responsibility constantly back to the level of human will and decision making. If we choose the good and the right as individuals, guided and strengthened by God's grace, then social structures, laws, and states will strengthen and grow for the benefit of all. If we choose selfishly and poorly, society weakens and we all suffer. To do this, and this gets to solidarity, to do this, to choose the good, the right, the just, we need one another. God's grace comes to us through each other, through the sacraments we celebrate together, through Christian community and charity, as well as through common human decency. That is solidarity, coming together to support, strengthen, and stand with each other, united in love by the power of the Spirit, who unites us in the totus Christus, the full Christ. For justice, the first principle, for human dignity and the common good to thrive, the first two principles, we must constantly reach out to each other, encourage each other, challenge each other, defend each other, love each other. That is solidarity. Now, for Augustine, solidarity is not just an ecclesial virtue. He does not mean it simply as solidarity among Catholics or among Christians. In City of God, Augustine is surprisingly clear that the citizens of the City of God are dispersed around the world across all societies, peoples, and religions. The City of God, or Heavenly City, is not coextensive with any one state or country, culture or people, form of government, or social organization. And it's important to remember that at this time, many of his contemporaries had in fact identified the church and the city of God, the theme that appears in scripture, with the Roman Empire. Augustine backs way off from that. The city of God is to be found everywhere in the world, sometimes hidden, sometimes obvious. It happens whenever and wherever individuals and groups exercise their free will to choose the right and the good. That is the city of God. Those choices for the right and the good are, in Augustine's ways of thinking, enlightened and strengthened by God's grace. God's grace, which is active in all persons, all nations, all religions. In Book 19, he writes, "The city of God recruits citizens from every nation, gathering a society of aliens who speak all languages. Aliens who speak all languages. It takes no account of the differences in their customs, laws, and institutions by which earthly peace is established or maintained. It suppresses none of them, destroys none. Rather, it maintains and observes everything which, though different in different nations, tends to one and the same end, earthly peace." That's Book 19, paragraph 17. So solidarity extends beyond the church, beyond Christians, to all people of goodwill who exercise their will to choose the good, the just, and the right in their societies and communities across the globe. So solidarity extends beyond the boundaries of the church. Solidarity is to be sought with good Muslims who work for the Islamic Relief Worldwide organization, as well as with Catholics who work for Catholic Relief Services. Solidarity is to be sought with the Jewish family and children's services, as well as with Catholic charities, with the YMCA, as well as with Augustinian defenders of the rights of the poor. And finally, subsidiarity. As I mentioned, early in his ministry as bishop, Augustine accepted the common understanding of the Roman Empire as God's instrument to spread Christianity. However, he begins to change his mind around the year 400. He grew more and more suspicious of empire, not only the Roman Empire, but empire in general. In City of God, his critique of empire as the libido dominandi, the lust for power, for domination, for control, becomes a major theme. In Book 4 of City of God, he seems to favor limited government, or at least local government, as opposed to empire. Humankind would have been happier, he says, without empires. He writes, "All kingdoms would have been small, rejoicing in concord with their neighbors, so there would have been fully as many kingdoms among the peoples in the world as there are now houses among citizens in a city." That seems like an argument for small government. Lust for power and greed for land was the engine of empire. But a closer look at the text locates Augustinian subsidiarity not in any particular form of government. After all, a petty king can be as tyrannical as a global emperor. Augustinian subsidiarity and subsidiarity in Catholic social teaching has less to do with political philosophy or structure and everything to do with the full exercise of will. The problem, the threat to subsidiarity, is government of any size or level which suppresses or thwarts our God-given capacity to exercise will. The solution is subsidiarity, abiding respect for what individuals and communities can accomplish by their own decisions and initiatives. Let us live good lives, and the times are good. We ourselves are the times. Subsidiarity is the guarantee and the challenge to make sure people can live good lives based on the exercise of free will and confidence that their decisions are respected within the limits of just laws and the common good. Okay, let's bring all of this to a conclusion. The four principles then of Catholic social teaching, human dignity, the common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity, are interrelated. Each principle defines and describes a way of living and working together in society. And each principle must both contribute to and critique our understanding of the other three. In other words, they don't exist separately. They must also become part of our ongoing conversation so that they don't remain words on papers or websites. Augustine forged these four principles on the anvil of the social, political, and ecclesial challenges he faced in his ministry as a bishop. He reached back into sacred scripture, as well into the philosophy of his day, a blend of Platonism and some thoughts from Aristotle, to build an infrastructure upon which a just and loving society could be built. He warns us that on this earth, we will never achieve perfect justice or peace. The selfishness of pride, domination, lust, and ignorant curiosity is just too strong. We just need to look at what's going on in our nation today. Augustine talks about ignorant curiosity, the concupiscence of the eye, and it lines up perfectly with conspiracy theories. So we, each and every one of us who cares about justice and peace, we are migrant workers in this world. We move from project to project as we labor to build the city of God, knowing our work will never be finished. We have here no lasting city. Nonetheless, as we strive for peace and justice, our work, inspired, directed, and empowered by God's grace, is its own reward. In the middle of Book 19, Chapter 17, Augustine provides us what I think are encouraging words, and I'd like to share them with you. I paraphrase just a bit. The heavenly city, that is the city of God, is on pilgrimage in this world. Even so, we possess a degree of peace in this life because of our faith. By virtue of that faith, we strive with God's grace to live to lives of righteousness, knowing that each little victory of justice and love, each good action performed in relationship to God and our neighbor, provides a glimpse of heavenly peace. For our life here on earth, as well as our eternal life in heaven, is inevitably a social life. When Augustine retired in 387, his intention was to return to Africa and live a comfortable life as a Christian philosopher dedicated to study and prayer and contemplation. That didn't last too long. Within a few years, he was forced into becoming a priest in Hippo, and then succeeded as bishop in 395. So his life of prayer and study, which he tried to continue, was always in tension with a life of service and struggle in society. And that's the crucible within which Augustine's ideas of human dignity, the common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity emerge for us, primarily through the text of the City of God. We know Catholic social teaching was formalized in Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo's encyclical 1891, but so much of the thinking about Catholic social teaching goes back to Augustine and to how he responded to the sack of the Capitol. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. And I know I shared some questions that I thought might be helpful, but we don't need to go with them. Lacey, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and you can guide us as you will.
Great. So Father Jack, based on the time, did you still want to go into the small groups here, or would you like to open it up to Q&A?
I don't know. Probably just opening it up, maybe. That'd probably be the easiest way to do it. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone has a question, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can put it into the chat and we'll answer questions that way.
Oh, hi, Joe. Michael Dennis here. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Hi, Michael.
How are you, Joe? Good. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, by the way. Just awesome. But I had a couple of questions about the 4 points and the 4 principles of CST. And they all seem to require rationality. And that.
Oh, Michael Dennis.
Yes.
How are you?
Fine, I'm sorry. I didn't have my camera on.
Good to see
How are
you.
Good to see you too.
Good.
These 4 principles of CST definitely require rationality, among other things. And what do you do, especially looking at the subsidiarity, solidarity issue, when history, society, and justice, the common good, makes for its quality of decisions, not based on foolish superstition? I have a huge problem dealing with the QAnon conspiracy theories. And if you have a group of people who are not going to actually believe in rationality, how can you apply any of this? Or maybe you have applied any of this, maybe you have experience working with them. And how do you apply any of this to them to get them to move away from where they're currently sequestered?
Yeah, that's a critical issue, Michael. It's one I struggle with, even in the orbit of my own family. Sometimes, maybe not quite to the extreme of QAnon, but political differences. I mean, Augustine faced something similar in one of the responses to the fall of the Capitol in 410 was that it was the Christians' fault because they weren't worshiping the old ancient pagan gods of Rome, and the gods were displeased, and that was the reason for the fall of the Capitol. I think it comes back to what he wrote to the widow Proba in letter 130. There is no one in the human race who does not deserve love. That's a hard thing when you're looking at people who nurture lies for political reasons or for psychological reasons that they themselves may not even be aware of. All I can say, Michael, on that point is that's something I struggle with on a personal level, to accept and affirm, recognize their dignity as persons, which is very difficult to do. However, on a personal level, in the public sphere, in public dialogue, I think, like Augustine, you have to come out vociferously and use all your skill of rhetoric and passion for the truth and just fight it out there through words. But it's something I struggle with myself.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. As a Black man, particularly, I've run across this not only from the standpoint of color barriers, but also just from philosophical barriers with respect to the basic principle of human beings having been created equal. As you know, the human genome was unraveled here in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live, and very clearly showed that there are not sufficient differences between groups of people to justify the creation of other than one race. Everyone's actually one race, 99.5% the same, genome to genome. But getting that point across to people who have convinced themselves that it's not true and it's all a lie and it's a hoax is practically impossible.
Yeah,
it just is not going to happen, and it makes me very sad. I've personally started to arm myself. I have no choice. I have to do that because I'm at risk as a Black person. So I've had to do that. I'm not recommending that to everybody to do that, but I found it's necessary to me to do that. And whatever we can do to move the situation forward to get people back to rationality would work for me. Thank you anyway. I'll stop.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Michael. It was a great point. It's really good to see you.
My pleasure to see you too. Our next reunion, we have to get together once this pandemic thing's over with.
Yeah.
We have another question. This one's from Tim Denny. It says, since slavery existed in biblical times in Augustine's time and was used by Christians to justify slavery in the US, how would Augustine address slavery relative to equality?
So in Augustine's day, there were two types of slavery. One was the slavery of capturing human beings, ships pulling into a port like Hippo, and the brigands going out into the countryside, raiding villages, capturing the women and the children and the young men, bringing them to their ships, and then sailing off to sell them somewhere else. Augustine is sharply critical of that because of the violation of human dignity, and as you can imagine. In fact, there's a story, one time he was away on business, and there was a slave ship in the harbor at Hippo, full of mostly children, and his parishioners sold some of the plates and the cups that would be used in the liturgy, and raised the money and ransomed the slaves. They bought them back, and the pirates were happy with that. They just wanted money. So his teaching had an effect on his congregation. The other type of slavery was basically the mortgaging of children by parents who couldn't afford to raise them. So they would put their son or their daughter in service to another household. Augustine accepts that because it was part of the structure of the empire's economic system. And many of those people, many of those children and adolescents actually had a better life because they at least had shelter and food. Just as well, we know many of them were also terribly abused in many ways by their owners. But at a certain point, those people could win their freedom. So he basically accepts a situation that is unfortunate, but it was the workable solution of the time. But slavery as the selling of people for profit, he condemns.
It's a good question. Yeah. Do we have other questions, sir? Anyone?
Question, within the context of the order of love, I think you spoke about, can you connect that to environmental justice?
Oh, wow. Hi, Sister Sharifa, nice to meet
Yes.
you.
Nice to meet you too.
You know, that is not something that any of my students have raised. We talk about the order of loving, the hierarchy of love, and we talk about respect for creation, but integrating those two is not, wow. I would approach it this way. Obviously, the planet is our mother, and without the respect and love and care for the future, her future, we are imperiling everyone, especially our children and grandchildren and further descendants. So in terms of the hierarchy of being, the hierarchy in the order of loving, it has to be integrated into the love. Basically, it has to be integrated into human dignity. Care for the planet is part of human dignity. For without it, we have no future. That's a very fruitful question. I want to think about that. Are you in Philly, sister?
I am in Philly.
My hometown.
Yay.
So we have another question. This one's from Marianne McCarthy. It says, there are Catholics who feel that being in the Capitol on January 6th was an act of seeking the truth and are still looking for the truth. Don't we risk losing some of our own?
Mamma mia. You didn't tell me the questions were going to be this hard. So Marianne, let me respond to that in a very particular way. Augustine talked a lot about concupiscence. You might be, if you've read Confessions, well, people who start reading Confessions are interested in the sex, right? Okay, he's a very clever writer, so he draws you in with some interesting language and examples. But if you read Confessions carefully and begin a deep dialogue with Augustine, you realize that what he means by concupiscence isn't just sexual lust, which gets people into trouble, certainly, and causes harm when the power dynamic comes in. But he talks about the other two types of concupiscence. One is the libido dominandi, pride, considering oneself as the center of everything. The third is what he calls curiosity of the eyes. It took me years to figure out what he was talking about, because in Confessions, he talks about curiosity is one of the best ways for learning. So how could he be talking about curiosity as something destructive, something disordered? But if you listen to him carefully, he says curiosity for the truth, curiosity for information that builds up human dignity and the common good and solidarity. That's good. But curiosity that is useless or harmful is one of the three types of concupiscence. And I think, I always put gossip in that category of information that is really not going to do anybody any good. It's more destructive than anything. I never really thought of conspiracy theories as an example of curiosity of the eyes that he talks about. But I think it's a powerful example. So I in dialogue with fellow Catholics or Christians or anyone who's buying into conspiracy theories, I think that needs, if possible, it needs to open up to a long conversation. What are you looking for? What is the motivation for your wanting to know? What are your sources? On whose authority? All of those questions that Augustine asks about faith, I think need to be asked about idle curiosity, as he calls it. Those are very hard conversations. But going back to Michael Dennis's point, if we respect our fellow Catholics who buy into these conspiracy theories, I think, what we used to call in the novitiate fraternal correction is in order. And I've had to do this with some members of my own family. So what is your motivation for? I mean, that's what Augustine always comes back to. What is your motivation for whatever it is? So that's, and how I would, Marianne, how I would approach that.
Well, can I just follow up with, I think it's dangerous when we mix politics and religion. This young man is in search of the truth, and he believes the truth was, he feels outside people were involved and invited into the Capitol for the violence. They weren't the truth seekers. He reminds me, I mean, I'm old enough to be his mother, but he reminds me of the what word am I looking for? The demonstrations of the 60s, where people were looking for the truth and thinking that, something's wrong. And he's a God-fearing young man. And the reality is not to at least respect that he's brilliant. His thoughts, then if you just shut him down, then you've not kept him close to he's close to my heart. But
that's really good. Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but.
No, go ahead. I mean, speak to that. because he kept me on the phone 2 hours Monday night. And the reality, I feel like Switzerland, you know, that if, and I don't believe, I mean, I don't believe you should mix politics and religion. I believe whoever you voted for is your business, and whoever I vote for is my business, and this and that. And this, there's still a huge group of people. And I don't know that he was into the QAnon but he does believe there are some untruths that will be uncovered eventually. And the rest of us are just very naive that everything went along. So I ask you as a scholar, what do I say to this brilliant man? I also was a teacher that seeks me for conversation on religion. I go to Mass on occasion with him, have gotten him involved in Villanova, but what do you say? I'll leave it to you now. Give me some parting advice.
Well, the fact that you stayed on the phone that long and listened to him, and I mean, that was an act of love in itself, of sharing your.
Oh, I do. I love him. I do. I love him. He's not even related. That's probably why I love him.
Yeah. I think just keep doing that, but I think if he can come to respect your point of view and your critique of the situation and listen, you need to listen to him, as difficult as it might be. But if he feels listened to and respected, that very often is the context within which change begins to happen.
Yes, but I'm going to shock your whole audience here. He has some excellent points that make me wonder, am I that naive? Now, there you go. And I'm old enough to be his mother. So yeah. It makes, you know, there's something in his, but I don't want to take, other people have questions, but thank you for your guidance and thought on that. But it's not an easy, and it's not over.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not easy. Thank you, sir.
Did you want to do maybe one more question?
Sure.
Okay. Well, first off, apparently it's Father Gary McCluskey's birthday. So happy, it was in the chat. Sorry, I had to bring it up.
I saw that.
Happy birthday, Father. So that's from Ann M. And then she also has the question, where is fear of losing your social economic standing addressed in City of God and Augustine's sermons?
Well, one of the people who came from Italy, the sack of Rome caused a flow of refugees out of Italy because Alaric and the Visigoths, they didn't stop with Rome. They began attacking all of the towns and villages around. So from what we know, thousands of Italians fled Italy across the Mediterranean as refugees into the safety of North Africa. It's very different. It's interesting. It's the opposite direction that refugees are sailing today. But they got into their flimsy wooden boats and crossed the Mediterranean, and many of them ended up in Hippo. And one of the people who ended up in Hippo was the wealthiest woman in the empire, a woman by the name of Proba. She was a widow. And after she settled into her estates in North Africa, she wrote Augustine a letter about prayer. Teach me about prayer. And his response is fascinating because he addresses her questions about prayer. How do I pray always? What does that mean when St. Paul says that? But he does so in the context of exile, because she is an exile, both as a widow, the loss of her husband put her into a type of exile, and also as a refugee, albeit a wealthy one. And he begins to comment on what does it mean to lose one's possessions. And this gets to your question, the fear of losing your social economic standing addressed. So Augustine simply makes the point, people are more important than possessions. So if you lose your social and economic standing, Augustine's point is, well, then you have to realize that you are like the refugees. We are all refugees. We are all exiles in this world. So it's an invitation when we lose something politically or socially or monetarily to identify with those who have experienced that same loss, although in much greater ways. We are all refugees, would be Augustine's response, just as at least as a way of beginning to answer that question.
Do we have any more questions? Lacey, anything written out?
There is one more. I wanted to. Sure. This is from Carol. Oh, sorry. Is it Gallant? Carol says, "Are we as people making progress in these 4 principles over these hundreds of years? Also, it seems like Pope Francis' encyclical and the idea of shared vision or dreaming together has some roots here with Augustine. What are your thoughts?"
Yes, I would agree. I think, Augustine was the one father of the church quoted more than any other father of the church in the documents of the Second Vatican Council. So his thought was present there. And I think, although Pope Francis is not an Augustine scholar, as Pope Benedict was, nonetheless, you can see the themes. Pope Francis basically is continuing the tradition of Catholic social teaching started in 1891 with Rerum Novarum, and he's applying it to the challenges we face today. So I see Pope Francis as updating Catholic social teaching in response to current problems. And Michael Dennis wants the PowerPoint. How can I share that?
You can send it to me and I'll make sure that everybody gets it.
Okay.
Right. Very good. I think, Joe, it's time to let you go free. I want to thank you very much for a very fine, concise, understandable, at least for me, a presentation. And I hope that everyone else shares those same thoughts. You have always been a gentleman and a scholar and a friend, and we're very thankful that you took the time tonight to be with us.
Thank you, Jack. It was an honor, really.
Right, thank you.
Hope to see you again soon in the flesh.
Right, same
Thank you.
way.
Have a
Right,
good night.
thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
all.
Listening
Thank
to us.
you.
Right,
Thank you.
good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank
Honor to be
you.
with all of you.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Bye, sister. Take care.
Thank you. You too. God bless.
Oh, that's right. I should stop talking. I'll send you that right now, Lacey.
Okay, thank you.
Great to see you. I hope it was what you were looking for.
It was.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Very
Very
good,
good.
Joe.
All right.
Very good.
Very
It's fine.
comprehensive.
All right,
Okay, we'll see you all. Take care.
all right, thank you,
Okay.
Joe.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye, good night.
Thank you, Joe.
Night.